Hello and welcome to, I don't know why I'm singing, to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Playing God, which is episode number 17 of Season 2 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the second season episode, Playing God. So Playing God is the episode in which a Trill candidate to become a joined Trill comes to the station to be the sort of... have Jadzia Dax be his mentor to show him what it's like to be a joined Trill. However, Dax has a reputation of flunking all prospective Trill hosts, and so he's terrified that Jadzia is going to flunk him. But she is insisting, because this is the first time Jadzia Dax is taking on a protege, and she is insisting that was just Curzon who was mean and not her, and so she tries to be all light and informal, but he's not really buying it, and she does indeed eventually have to tell him that it's not looking good for him, and he gets upset, he yells at her, throws a temper tantrum, and he thinks he threw his chances away, but turns out he didn't, because Jadzia gives him another shot, because there's some B-plot with a tiny proto-universe that's about to destroy the entire sector, and she needs his help to put it on the runabout and get it back to the Gamma Quadrant, which is really dangerous, but he's a Class 5 pilot, so he's able to show off his piloting skills and return the proto-universe back to where it came from, and then Jadzia and him part on really good terms, with her saying that she will give him a recommendation, and then she smiles to herself and says, "I'm not Curzon." So, if you noticed and you could say this was just my choice, but I think there's a reason why I chose to do it this way. If you notice my recap of the synopsis, I barely mentioned the thing with the Proto-universe. And I didn't even mention the Voles at all. The Voles are cool, but they're not really necessary. They're probably the best thing about this episode, to be fair. But they're not necessary to the plot. So I heard some people say it's a C plot. It's not really. I think even the writers themselves referred to Shadowplay and then this episode as A, B, and C, which I disagree with that. I already talked about Shadowplay, how it's A and B plot with a couple of slice of life scenes in there. In this case, I never even thought to consider it a C plot. In this case, it's very clearly A and B plot, and there's also a thing with the Voles that happens in the middle of both plots. It's not its own plot. It's like something that's happening along the plot. But anyway, I never even thought to consider another plot, and maybe my brain just works differently than other people who, studied storytelling and story structure and stuff like that. But from my sensibilities, it is definitely not a C plot, and it's not really relevant to anything, but it's cool. So as I mentioned in previous videos before, this episode is part of a 3-episode arc, or 3 episodes of DS9 in a row, where for some reason or another, I did not tape this off the TV. So, if you're not aware, when I was 14, 15, when these were first coming out, I was taping every single episode of TNG and DS9 off the TV and watching them like repeatedly over and over again. So I've seen every episode of, season 1 and 2 of DS9 and the later seasons of TNG over and over again, and would tape them and watch them. But for one reason or another, I have no idea why, I missed 3 episodes in the row. It was Paradise, Shadowplay, Playing God. So the effect is I've seen these 3 episodes a lot less than I had the rest of season 2. So it has the effect of it being somewhat of a enigma for me. Like, these episodes seem less worn out and I'm less familiar with them. They seem a bit more fresh than the rest of the episodes of season 2, because it wasn't until like the late 90s, I want to say, like 99, 98, that I think it was 99, 2000, then when I actually watched these episodes for a second time. Whereas the rest of the episodes of season 2, not only have I seen them a second time, I saw them a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, probably eighth. So it's just a personal thing with me, but it is a bit strange going back and watching this episode. I think out of the 3 episodes, for whatever reason, Paradise, Shadowplay, and this is the one that seems most unfamiliar to me. And maybe that's because it's more of a forgettable episode and I just forget it more, and I've seen it a lot less, so it has the effect of, it doesn't seem as familiar to me as the rest of the episodes. So that may or may not color how I view this episode. So I was trying to find the original promo, because some of these promos on YouTube of the original promo is very bad quality. The original promo for this episode, I couldn't find it, unfortunately. I would have actually included it in my video if I was able to find it, but unfortunately I couldn't find it. But from memory, I'll have to go by memory, but from memory, because unlike, the TNG Blu-rays have all the episode promos on the Blu-ray, which I'm loving going back and watching them, but DS9, which is just on DVD, it doesn't have a Blu-ray. Unfortunately, it does not have the promos. So, see, I was going to see if I could find them on YouTube, but I can't, so I have to go by memory. And by memory, the entire promo was just about the Proto-universe. Like, it was just about, there's this tiny universe and people are living, and they showed Kira's like, we need to destroy it or it will destroy us, and Odo's like, I don't kill ants, Major, and they had the station blowing up, and I was like, oh no, this Proto-universe. And then I was like, wow, that looks amazing. This looks like an awesome premise. Like, what are they going to do? Like, a tiny universe? Like, inside, and it's on the station, and they have this moral dilemma where if they either have to, the universe are colliding, so they're going to have to destroy an entire universe to save their own universe. Like, that's a great story, a great moral dilemma. This is amazing. I can't wait for next week's episode. Tune in, and I see it's all about this stupid fucking Trill perspective host who's very boring, very bland, not a well-written character. I think I'm actually very interested. I've wrote stories myself that are metaphors for people who are graduating high school and or graduating college and looking for jobs, and how devastating that is, and how people judge other people in interviews and stuff like that. And so the concept of having this young man who's coming of age and he's being judged on wanting to become a Trill symbiont is an interesting concept to me. But 2 things. First of all, as I mentioned, that's not what I fucking was expecting. The promo promised me an episode about a tiny universe destroying this universe, not about some fuckhead trying to become a joint Trill. And second thing, he's not a well-written character. It's a good concept, but they don't do a particularly good job with that concept in this episode. And another thing, third thing about this, they completely retcon Dax's character. Now, to be fair to the old writers here, they weren't sure what to do with Jadzia Dax, and they've talked about this before in interviews. And their first instinct in season 1, which I talked about in some season 1 episodes when it was relevant, is that Jadzia, they tried to play her as someone who's wise beyond her years. You know, that she only looks like a young woman in her 20s, that in fact she's like over 300 years. So they try to play her as like a Yoda type. I can't remember exactly, like Rick Berman said something to Terry Farrell. I can't remember the exact, when she asked how do I play this character, he said it's a cross between Yoda and, I can't remember what the other one he said. But I remember her response to that was like, how the fuck do you do that? And she didn't really know how to do that. And it didn't really come across. And they were starting to realize that after season 1 that it just wasn't working. They couldn't find the character's voice. And so they were playing around with stuff. And in season 2, they started to jigger the character around and to make her more sort of fitting to how Terry Farrell, to her strengths, and to how she could portray a joined symbiont, because the original idea of doing a Yoda type character who's like wise beyond her years and very serene and sort of zen wasn't working with how Terry Farrell was playing her. And that's something I totally agree with. It just really, I mean, sometimes it was, but other times it just didn't seem to be playing to her strengths. So, in season 2, they've been trying to jigger her character, and it's something I've noticed since the start of season 2, since we're in the siege, when she was like yelling at Kira for the giant spiders and having to be in this tiny little ship and being upset like that, and from invasive procedures where she was very sort of hypercritical that, oh, he's come to steal my symbiont and whatnot, although she was still portrayed somewhat wise in that episode. But they were starting to loosen her character up a bit throughout season 2, and I've been noticing it's a gradual thing throughout the episode. She's a lot more playful. She has more of this, banter with Cisco than she did in season 1. But this is the episode where they whap. In fact, I think they went a bit too far in this episode, and I think they pulled back a bit for the future. But this is the episode when we went like full on. Now she's very eccentric, like party girl, like very like all into humor and bucks the rules and does what she wants. She's a loose cannon, and that is not at all how they portrayed her. And as I said, they were loosening her up all season. They were making, again, having that banter, the sarcasm, that kind of thing. But it was more gradual. It felt more like you wouldn't notice it unless you have no life like me and sit down and analyze these fucking episodes and really pay attention. That they were gradually changing her character over, and it was like a frog in the boiling water thing. You turn it up very slowly, you don't notice until this episode where they would poof. It was a jolt. It was boom. And I remember when I first saw this episode back when I was 14, 15, whatever. I noticed it then, and in fact, I didn't notice the frog in boiling water effect. I didn't realize that they were drastically changing Jadzia because they were doing it gradually. So I had no idea until this episode. I was like, whoa, this is totally out of character. for her. Like, especially that thing with the wrestling dude when Arvin, I think his name was, when he goes to her quarters in the morning and this weird, like, muscular guy, like, answers the door, gets right in his face, like, what do you want? And then she's, like, wearing a bathrobe and, like, naked. So, yeah, it's really heavily implying that they were, getting it on, which goes totally against what they were trying to establish in season 1, where they flat out said she was not interested in relationships at all. But, I don't think they were actually saying they got him on, because they mentioned that there was wrestling. So, but I've watched reviews and other people, and even from Terry Farrell herself, and she is not entirely certain whether or not they were actually getting it on or just wrestling, if it was just innocent wrestling. Like, why would she hire a wrestling coach to come to her quarters in the morning, and then when the dude shows up, she's, like, completely walking around her quarters, like, wrapped around in towels, but naked? Seems like something's going on there. It seems like if it was an innocent wrestling thing, why wouldn't they go to, like, a Hall of Suites or a gym or some sort of thing? But anyway, but that's, that's neither here nor there. But I think it is out of character for her, because, and this is something else they retconned, because in season 1 they were making it clear, like, I just watched season 1 and I just analyzed the fuck out of it. They were making clear that the reason why Jadzia was turning down Bashir is because it's not that she didn't like him. It's not that she was like, well, I'm not interested in you. It was because I'm not interested in anybody. I'm 300 years old. I'm beyond this kind of thing. I don't really care about getting in relationships or whatnot. And they gradually retconned that, and they changed it to, I just don't like you, Julian. I'll go out and flirt with all these other random people. And, like, she was flirting with, like, that Klingon chef, and she has some random huge muscular man in her quarters. And so, I don't know. The retcon kind of makes me feel bad for Julian. Like, that, because it changes it from, and just Trills are different. The way we handle relationships are different. We're just not interested in you that way, too. Nah, I was just all a bunch of lies to get you the fuck away from me because I don't like you. And look, Julian is a good-looking guy. My humble opinion, better looking than this fucker, who's the wrestling dude. But I don't know. Everyone's got different tastes. But my point is, this is definitely not how they were originally writing it. That it comes off as a retcon. This whole episode is, they completely, like, change her character drastically, I think. And I think it was a lot of it was for purposes of the plot, because they wanted to create this tension between her and Arvin. They wanted to present her as, like, this eccentric, over the top, like, when he comes to the station, she's playing tango, and she's like, oh, play tango, and he's just like, I don't know, and he's like, oh, no, well, come and get me in the morning. This big muscular guy, and she's walking around the room naked, and so it's supposed to portray her. It's for purposes of the plot to be like, Arvin's kind of like, is his name Arvin? I keep calling him that. I'm sure that's his name, but whatever the hell that guy's name is, I'm gonna look it up. But it's trying to portray it like he's in, like, Alice in Wonderland. He's like an upside down world. Ooh. But yeah, it's. I'm sorry, and I know there may be some people out there who let's see. I think it says Arjun. It's not Arvin, it's Arjun. Pardon me. Sorry. Arjun. Anyway, it sounded like they were saying Arvin. Anyway, Arjun. Yeah, they just did it for purposes of the plot. And as I said, I think some people may disagree. But here's the thing. The one sort of argument that I think that I would accept, or that I would say, okay, I can see what you're saying here, is that they already started changing her character in season 2. So if you compare this episode to like episode 4 of season 1, then yeah, it's a stark, drastic change in character, and these characters are nothing alike, and anyone who tried to argue against that would be objectively wrong. But if you compared her character here to, say, episode 3 of season 2, The Siege, there's only a slight difference. I mean, there is a difference for sure. I still wouldn't expect her to go, like, do all this crazy shit, but it's not totally out of character. And then you get into episodes like Rules of Acquisition that first showed her playing Tango. You'd be like, well, wait a second. That's not really out of character for her all, because she's already playing Tango. I would argue she's acting a bit more eccentric and more crazy than she did in episodes like Rule of Acquisition. But no, we're having a conversation. And now the difference is less and less. But I still say that they went too far. You went too far in this episode, and that I believe that they did pull her back. So if you look at her character in like the future, season 3, 4, 5, 6, not 7, unfortunately, that's a different character. But anyway, that's another topic. But if you look at her character and compare in this episode, to her portrayal in seasons 3, 4, 5, and 6, she's not even that out there or eccentric as she's shown in this episode. I think it's like in season 2 they were cranking her up, like slowly getting her more eccentric until they went to the episode that went poof, and then after they went this high, they're like, okay, this is too much. Let's bring it back down a little bit, and we'll keep it there. So this episode seems a bit out of sync with the rest of the show as far as Jadzia's character goes. Now, as far as the Trill, I actually don't have a problem with that. I feel like sometimes it's a bad thing that I watch a bunch of reviews and read a bunch of reviews before I come in and read my review, because I'm a bit influenced by them, because when I hear like this opinion several times that I just totally disagree with, I just have to address it. In this case, I've heard several people who seem to be confused about how the Trill work and how the joined, symbiont and host joining works, and I talked about this before because those reviews have also talked about it before, so I've already refuted this, and I'm confused that they're confused. Like, I think it's very straightforward. Like, I heard people say stuff like, oh, they should refer, Jadzia should refer to herself as we, as plural, because it's actually two people. Or, how does Jadzia have conversations with the different past hosts and stuff like that? I'm like, no. Like, you're totally not getting it. It's nothing like that. That's not how they should do it. That actually, they have, and they're like, oh, it's not very clear. No, it is very clear. I hate to fucking bring up this episode as a comparison, but I think it's the easiest Star Trek reference to do. It's like Tuvix. You take two different people with two different personalities, you put them together, mix them all up. I can spill my drink. And they combine to make one person. It's not two people. It's not two voices talking to each other. It's not different past shows talking to each other. It's one person with everything just mixed together to make one person. So, let me try to make an analogy. It's similar to the one they made in Tuvix. And it's not a perfect analogy, but it's the best I could come up with. So if you got a cup of coffee and you pour 2% milk and in half the cup, you stir it together, you mix it. So now it's a different substance than it was before. It's all mixed together. It's not like once you pour that milk into the coffee and stir it all up, it's not like you can choose to just drink the coffee or just drink the milk. You have one substance that's combined of those two different flavors. Now, in this hypothetical situation, even though you couldn't do it in real life, but for the purposes of this analogy, in this hypothetical situation, the milk in your coffee dies, and it evaporates, it goes away, and all is left is the coffee. And so you take that coffee and you put in half and half, or like cream. So instead of 2% milk, you put in cream, halfway, mix it all together. Now you have a different substance. But it's going to be similar to the other one because you still have the coffee, so it's still going to have the coffee flavor, but the cream flavor is totally different than the 2% milk flavor. And so it's a different substance. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but I think it makes perfect sense to me. Again, I'm confused that people seem to be confused by this. They shouldn't refer to themselves as we because they're one person. They shouldn't have different voices talking in their head because they're one person. They just have their one personality is made up of both the personality from the host and the personality from the symbiont. I think the episode Dax made this super clear, and I think I talked about this again before in that episode, and maybe I talked about it in Invasive Procedures as well. But it's very clear that the symbiont has the memories of all the past hosts, but it's not like they have different voices of the host in their head. It's like, oh God, I'm trying to think of another analogy. It's like I have the memories of when I was 10 and when I was 20 and when I was 30, and genetically speaking, or like not genetic, but like atoms or whatever, that was a totally different person than who I am now. Like, not just metaphorically, but like physically. It was made up of totally different, atoms or whatever than what I am now. So it was a different person. Yet I still have their memories. But it's not like I talked to that 10-year-old or I talked to that 20-year-old. I had that voice in my head from the 20-year-old. They're just memories I have. So if you try to extrapolate that out to the sci-fi concept with the Trill, they remember being in a different host's body. It's just like remember being 20 years old or something. It's not like they have that 20-year-old talking in their head. They just have them, oh yeah, I remember that. So in this very episode, Jadzia talks about how Arjun needs to be sure and he needs to be absolutely prepared. Otherwise, if they join a host who's not up to snuff or not prepared to take a symbiont, then it can have negative effects that the symbiont's personality can overwhelm the host's personality, which is interesting. Now, if you input future knowledge into this, we can learn in the episode Equilibrium that an improper joining has in fact occurred before, and it didn't turn out very well. And also the fact that the Trill exaggerate just how rare a host needs to be to join with the symbiont, that apparently there's actually tons of hosts, or it's not as difficult to join as they let on because there's just not enough symbionts to go around, so they want to curtail the demand by saying, oh, only the least best of the best, but apparently it's not that difficult. But even knowing that, it still makes sense that a host needs to be prepared, needs to be ready to take a symbiont, and that if they do not have a firm enough or strong enough personality, that they could be overwhelmed because they're basically they get like an input, like a jolt of 300 years worth of experience, knowledge, and memories, like instantly. For like a young person who only's been alive for 20 years, and I imagine would be like, you saw they showed on screen like Jadzia's reaction when she was first joining, you also saw Gerard's reaction. Gerard, that's his name, from Invasive Procedures. Like, he was, oh my god, because that makes sense that would be this jolt of the knowledge, but that you have to be firm enough in who you are. You have to know who you are, and you have to have a firm personality. Otherwise, the joining might be sort of incorrect, which again, as I say, the touch on later on in Ink with Link Verum was someone who's not mentally stable gets a symbiote, and how that didn't turn out very well. So it makes sense that you would have to be mentally stable and you would have to have a firm personality. And I think you input that knowledge, this episode actually makes complete and utter sense that Jadzia is worried that he is just doing what his father wants him to do, or just doing what society wants to do, and doesn't really have a firm grasp on who he is, and that she helps him find that in the episode. So in that case, the storyline works. See, I don't know. It makes perfect sense to me, and it's very clear that, and I think I've heard people say, oh, the writers don't understand what they're doing with the Trill. No, I think it's quite clear. Now, does that mean they don't mess up from time to time? No, it does not mean that, because they mess up in this very episode. Because the one thing they've made perfectly clear, repeatedly, and will again, is that the Trill symbionts have all the memories of their past hosts. As I said, it was like, I remember when I was 20. That kind of thing. They remember what it's like to be that different host. So, in this episode, Jadzia mentioned that she doesn't know why Curzon accepted her. Because he mentioned that Curzon rejected her from the program, but when she applied again and she asked to get the Dax symbiont, Curzon didn't reject it. He was okay with it. And Jadzia was talking to Arjun about it. And she was saying, I don't know why he accepted it. Maybe it's because it appealed to his sense of irony. But you should know why, because you have all this fucking memory. So that's the part where I think they messed up. And someone maybe is going to come and fight me. It's like, no, actually it makes sense. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't. And then there's a whole other thing that we'll get to in the episode, Facets, towards the end of season 3, where they bring this very thing up over again. And spoilers for that episode, but they reveal that Curzon actually had a crush on Jadzia, which is why he rejected her. And I think that's a bit of a retcon, honestly, but it's a small one, because you could argue, well, they never said he didn't. But here's the thing. If Curzon, and they're acting like it was a huge secret, and Curzon was telling Jadzia, it's like, I'm sorry, I didn't want you to know. She has the fucking Dax symbiont. She would know this. It wouldn't be a secret. She would be aware. That's why I think it's a retcon, because she would already know it if that was the case. So, for me, this is a case. Those examples are a case of the writers getting the Trill wrong. But because they've made it, you can't say, well, maybe they don't have all their memories. No, they've made this very clear multiple times. And again, it's like me having memories from my 20-year-old self. It's not like, and it's the same thing with the Trill symbiont. They have the memories of their past lives. But anyway. Anyway. So, yeah, that's that thing. And the story with Arjun and Jadzia, I'll be honest, like, I came into this episode watching it today thinking I wouldn't like it. I remember, oh, this episode sucks. But it actually wasn't as bad as I remember. Like, those little nitpicks aside, the Arjun and Jadzia storyline was actually okay. It was a bit silly. She was acting out of character, and that was a bit hard to take, and it was done for plot purposes. But I love the scene where Cisco is talking to Jadzia and talking sense into her and saying, like, look, you're trying to be different than Curzon, but you're not doing Arjun any favors. You know, you gotta tell him what you think, and so he can help himself. And so she did, and he blew up and sort of had a temper tantrum, but she didn't hold that against him, and she still came back and like, look, we can work this together, and that was great. And also, I will say, I did love that scene where they went to the wormhole to try to return the Proto-universe, and the whole, sector was at stake, and everyone could die, and it was like huge stakes. So that was actually intense, and it was actually the way that he was piloting. It was interesting. It's the first time we've seen what the wormhole looks like when you're not moving, and it looks totally different. And it had these big balls that I usually just see him streak by. And that he had to be, very careful and put it through a little hole. That was good. That had me invested. That was intense, and it was a good tension filler for Jadzia and Arjun to sort of bond over that. And then when they part on good terms, and she's like, "I'm not Curzon," I'm like, that felt satisfying. So I do think it was an acceptable storyline. So, now let me get to the Proto-universe thing. And as I was mentioning earlier in the video, this is what I wanted the episode to be about. I wanted it to be about this moral dilemma and this other universe. And oh my god, what an interesting concept. They did nothing with it. Instead of being this amazing concept that I thought it could be, it was a anomaly bullshit thread of the week. It could have been any generic thread of the week. I mean, they did have that one scene where Odo and Kira were arguing about, oh, you can't just kill these people. And then that one log where Cisco's like, oh, I feel like I'd be like the Borg if I just killed them all or whatever. But other than that, it could have been any fucking generic threat of the week. It was just there to be a threat of the week. Now, again, I often on my channel have heaped praise on Michael Piller as being savior of Star Trek and an amazing writer. But I do point out, from time to time, there are times I disagree with him, and this is one of them. Because it was his decision to... because the original story idea for this episode was about the Proto-universe. That was the A plot. That was what the episode is about. In fact, I'm not even sure if the thing with Jadzia and the Trill existed. I think I heard somewhere it did exist as like a B plot, but the main focus was on the Proto-universe. But Michael Piller was the one who came in and said, "Now let's flip that. Let's make this a character story about Jadzia, and let's have the Proto-universe be the B-plot." And the writer, I don't know if I have the gentleman's name in front of me, but the person who wrote the episode, I'm trying to bring up his name now, wasn't happy about this. He, let's see. Trying to find the name. There's story by Jim Trombetta. Sorry. So that's probably who it was. Jim Trombetta. Anyway, yeah, it's Jim Trombetta. So he was unhappy with it because he said that he felt that it diminished the whole story with the Proto-universe, and it just became a generic threat, and it wasn't lost like the wonderment and the power and the moral dilemma, and they might as well, that they should have just saved it for a different episode if they wanted to do a Jadzia, some initiate thingy. And I 100% agree with him. I think he's absolutely correct. I think this would have been a much more interesting idea than the symbiont thingy. Sorry, but it was. If they really wanted the Jadzia Initiate thing to be the A-plot, they should have just saved this for a different episode and this needed to be the main focus. The fact that by relegating it to a B-plot, it completely becomes uninteresting. It doesn't do it justice. It just becomes another generic blah, 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 where there was so much they could have done with this idea. I would have loved to see the original script for this. I'm sure it would be amazing. I mean, that one scene where the part of the station like blew up, like that was intense. Like I wanted more stuff like that. And what I'm thinking of stuff like the episode Blink of an Eye over in Voyager, which would be, several years from this point. But it seems like that episode did what this episode could have done, because they could have actually shown us inside that universe. They could have shown us people inside that universe. It could have been like Blink of an Eye, where you see civilizations rise and fall, and you see all this stuff. They could just go from time period to time period and have like these weird lights and effect, and they could feel the effect of what Cisco and the outside world are doing, it almost like gods or whatever, like bright lights shining down. Like that would have been amazing, and also taken more time to spend on the moral dilemma. Like maybe one of these people could actually communicate with them somehow and think that they're gods or something, and that like really would touch on the episode title a bit more, playing God, how they would feel like, holy shit, they're treating us like gods. And they could have done so much more with this. And I'm sorry, it's way more interesting of an idea than the Jadzia stuff. And as I said, when I first tuned in to watch this episode, I was so disappointed. I was like, what the fuck is this? This is not what the promo promised. This is some boring ass character story with some dorky guy I don't care about. And Jadzia is acting totally out of character. And instead of what I was promised, an awesome, like, I always think of the episode of The Simpsons where Lisa like created this new world with the tooth, like many people, and they treated her as a god. Like this could have been something like that, but more serious. And there's just so much great storytelling potential. And they just relegated it to a thread of the week, normal bullshit, and it could have been anything. It could have been anything. And that is such a fucking waste. And I also talked about how, I think it was last week's, Shadow Play, I talked about how usually when the episode title will tell you which plot is the A plot. But I mentioned, next week's episode is the exception. And it is because the episode title refers to the B plot in the episode, Playing God. But I suppose you could try to fit it into the Jadzia thing, that she's kind of playing God with Arjun's career or whatever, but that's loose. It's obviously about the Proto-universe. And, it should have been the A plot. Like that was a huge mistake. I'm sorry, Michael Piller was 100% wrong for doing this. I think the writer was 100% correct that should have been the plot. It would have been a really powerful episode. Instead, I mean, as I said, it's not terrible, but it's way less interesting than what they could have done with the Proto-universe. I'm sorry, but it is. There's just not as much like moral dilemma, storytelling potential in this episode about this goofy youth trying to become a joint Trill. I mean, he wasn't that interesting of a character. I'm sorry, but he wasn't. And but this is a case where the Prime Directive, something I talked about recently with Homeward, where they actually portrayed it as a good thing. They didn't mention the Prime Directive, but part of why Cisco refused to destroy this universe was the Prime Directive. didn't want to interfere. So it's kind of a case where, because if they destroyed the universe, they would be acting. As I said, it would the difference between doing nothing and doing something. And in this case, they would be doing something to directly interfere with this universe. Therefore, they would be breaking the Prime Directive in that case. But anyway, God, yeah, there's so much they could have done. And I don't understand why taking the universe back to the Gamma Quadrant was necessary. Like, it seemed like they need to get away from the station. Okay, makes sense. Take it away from the station. It needs to be far away. They can't just beam it out into space next to the station and it'd still be too close. They gotta get it far away from the station. Why the Gamma Quadrant? Like, this whole dilemma of, oh my god, these big things are gonna blow up the ship through the wormhole. Why'd you go through the wormhole? They seem to imply they needed to take it back to where they found it in order for it to be okay again. Why? Didn't they find it in the wormhole, by the way? I thought they did, or I don't know. I thought they said it got stuck or whatever when they were in the wormhole. So that's where they found it, but they're not taking it back to the wormhole. They're taking it back to the Gamma Quadrant. Why is it safe in the Gamma Quadrant and not the Alpha Quadrant? Like, and I was wondering if there was, like, something I missed. There was, like, a line of dialogue that explained this. But, because I gotta be honest, I wasn't paying 100% attention when I watched it this afternoon. So I might have missed the line that said that. But, I watched another review that asked the same question, so it makes me feel vindicated that they didn't fucking answer it. There's no reason. Now the Voles, Cardassian Voles. This is I believe, if I'm correct, the only time Cardassian Voles are ever shown on DS9. They're definitely mentioned many, many times again after this, and it's just a cool concept. It's kind of a funny little thing to have, them chasing after these voles. And of course that scene where O'Brien's like, oh, I have this high-pitched sonic thing that can irritate them and drive them out, and he turns it on and Quark starts screaming like that. Armin Shimmerman gave a great performance there, so that was a really funny moment. That was hilarious, and just the guys of Cisco going, "I want those voles alive," and then later he's like, "Take those phasers off, stun, no more, Mr. Nice Guy." And then they called the Cardassian. I forgot that this was Gul Evek. I thought it was some random Cardassian, but no, this is actually the first appearance of Gul Evek in the franchise, the classic Gul Evek, who will of course appear on Journey's End, on TNG, and then Maquis, and then Tribunal, and then Preemptive Strike on TNG. And wait, did I say Maquis in this DS9? Oh, Journey's End TNG, yeah. And then in the Voyager pilot, Caretaker, he's the one chasing after Chakotay. So one of the few people who have appeared in all three of the 90s Trek, TNG, DS9, and Voyager. I think the others were Quark, Q. Riker doesn't count because it was Thomas Riker in Deep Space Nine, not William Riker. But anyway, I think I already talked about this in another video. Anyway, he's the one that they called to, ask how they could get rid of the Voles, and he was just being a dick. He was like, "Oh, mating season's come up, so it's coming up soon, so have fun with that." And he was like, and he started to say "Oh, you could just abandon Bajor and give us back the station," and O'Brien just shut it off. But that was a kind of funny scene that he was being such a dick about it. And he was like, "Oh no, you're having problems with the Voles. I am so sorry, blah blah. Here's a violin for you." It was kind of a funny scene. So I love the Voles, and I think that is probably the most memorable thing about this episode, to be honest. I remember once there was a drinking game where it had a list of things for the different various Star Trek shows. I have a feeling it was made like early in DS9's run. Like Voyager was there, so not too early. I think probably around season 3 or 4. But one of the things it says is drink every time they mention a Cardassian Vole. Finish your drink if you actually see one. Well, unfortunately, the only way you'll be finishing your drink is if you watch this episode, because I believe this is the only time they actually show them. But yeah, Cardassian Voles. Anyway, I would now like to thank all of those that support me over on Patreons. Very much appreciated. It does help me continue with my channel. Help me grow. Help me move on. And I'd like to give a big special thanks to Brandon Neilhouse, Jordan Johnson, and Antarius. Thank you so very, very much for your strong support. Also like to give a shout out to Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Manny Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Migalicio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, we got a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, playing God more like laying sod. Because you see, laying sod is yard work. It's boring, tedious, generally unpleasant, and you're always glad when it's finally over, just like this episode. Real talk. I don't remember this one well. I remember there was something about miniature universes and so on, but all that seems like a weak framing device for the real story, which was more Trill exposition. Yawn. Wake me up when we get to Vic Fontaine or the Borg. Why aren't the Borg in DS9? Imagine hearing the Borg Queen say Cisco in the same way she says Janeway. Imagine the Borg assimilating Vic Fontaine or Senator Vreenak. Then he could be a Borg and say his iconic line, like the Borg Queen, fake away. I'm sorry, what were we talking about? We were talking about playing God. And I will say, at first, I told you before about how when you have to explain your joke, it kind of takes all the humor out of it. But this time, it actually worked. I think when you went home with, laying sod is yard work and it's tedious, just like this episode, and you're glad when it's over, just like this episode. Okay, I will get you that. You did get there with this one, so I will give you a pass on that one. But as for the Vreenak Borg, that was funny. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, playing God more like judge, jury, and executioner. Have I lost my mind? It will be made clear in the next paragraph that I haven't gone insane. Dishonestly appropriates property without the consent of its owner and with the intention of depriving its owner, Kyrie091 or Kai Logic. I'm actually on jury duty this week, so I give Jadzia Dax 5 capital offenses out of 10. Adjusted comment. Odo, you can't just wipe out a civilization. We'll be committing mass murder. Major Kira. It's like stepping on ants, Odo. Odo, I don't step on ants, Major. Case 251, Major Kira versus the ants civilization. Fair enough. And oh my god, Steven, now everyone's going to start doing those puns. Playing God, more like... Anyway. Now you're going to do it, but that's all good. Next comment is from Antarius, who says, this was terribly boring and full of inconsistencies. The story about the guy wanting to be joined, totally uninteresting. The story about the Proto-universe, how is it possible to beam such a thing? Just a stupid space anomaly, an artificial thread of the week. The story about the Cardassian rodents, barely amusing. Next week on DS9, gigantic space ants invade the station and kill Kira by stepping on her. Isn't it ironic? That's something you can put an ironic sign. And then the giant ants come to step on Major Kira. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? My rating is 3 out of 10. By the way, that ironic song, just in case you're confused, I did that. I threw that in. Don't blame Antarius for that. Blame me. But anyway, Antarius, I'm sorry. I know we've had our disagreements in the past, but this time I think you've gone too far. Just take back what you said about the Cardassian Voles not being funny. Take it back! Take it back! They're hilarious! I'm kidding. Of course I'm kidding, but you are wrong. They are funny. Very funny. And especially when Quark does that. But anyway, no. Just kidding. Just kidding. Anyway, but I do love your thing about the giant ants. Everyone's picking on poor Kira and her statement about killing ants. By the way, I will say when I was a little kid, I used to hate it when people stepped on ants. Like, I would get very upset. Like, don't step on the ants. So I guess I was like Odo. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, can we turn this into a short and make it just about the Voles? There was an opportunity for some interesting stuff on the tiny civilization issue, but instead it turned into the anomaly of the week. And don't get me started how Jadzia handled the Trill initiation judgment. It's almost like she was asked to watch someone and decided to pretend to be enjoying a spring break vacation instead. 3 Voles out of 10. Oh my god, the reason why I laugh is because that was so true. You're so spot on. It's like, oh, this Trill initiate's coming, so I'm going to pretend like I'm on a spring break. I could just imagine Jadzia going around going, spring break, what? It's totally out of care. I think the only other time in the show where she is this crazy is the wedding episode when she's at that party and she's dancing with that like fire dance or whatever. But yeah, other than that, this is completely out of character for her. She's on spring break. That's perfect. That's perfect. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Playing God out of 10 is going to be a 6 good. I'll tell you what, I was split between a 5 and a 6. Which way to go? Because it's definitely straight down that middle. But I decided to give it the benefit of the doubt. Because as I said, when I watched it today, I was like, hey, this episode's actually not that bad. I was like dreading it. I was like, oh, this piece of shit again. But it wasn't that bad. It's still mildly entertaining. I think last couple times I watched it, I really held against it the fact that this had such a great idea and it just relegated it to be a mindless, stupid thread of the week, which is a crime. It's a storytelling crime, Michael Pillar. I'm sorry. I still like you. I still think you're amazing. But that's a crime. That is a storytelling crime to turn that into a useless thread of the week B plot when it could have been something very amazing. And we only get a hint. We only get a touch of what this episode could have been in those few scenes where Kira and Odo are arguing in Sisko's log. But that's it. That's all we get. And there could have been much more to it. It could have been the main focus of it. But anyway, as I said, I was dwelling on that, and I think I let that interfere with my enjoyment of the episode. But when I watched this episode, coming in, realizing, being at peace with the fact that, yes, this is just a useless speed plot, so let's move on. I actually kind of enjoyed it. The Voles were hilarious. I'm sorry, anyone who says the Voles weren't amazing is wrong. This episode is memorable for the Voles itself. But, and the Jadzia and stuff with Arjun, or whatever his name is. It wasn't the best ever, but as I said, there's some good character moments for Jadzia in there. There was some good character building. Just thinking about her, they should have made her act like she was on spring break. Spring break! Sorry, I think that's hilarious. And yeah, they totally had her acting out of character and retconned her. They went like too far with her in this episode. But other than that, still an interesting character story with her and Arjun. Like I said, I like the scene with her and Cisco's giving her the pep talk, and at the end when she like works it out, and they had that really tense scene with them trying to get through the wormhole. Like, that was a good scene. It's good tension. So I am going to be merciful, give this episode a positive rating. 6, lowest positive rating that I can, but a positive rating. 6 out of 10 for me. Anyway, that is it for my review of Playing God. So I'm going to be releasing this video, I believe, in January of 2025. It will be 2025 when you're seeing this, unless you're a Patreon supporter and you're seeing it 2 weeks in advance. But other than that, Happy New Year! Still, for me, my perspective, still 3 weeks away from New Year, but for you, Happy New Year! Which means I have already announced, again, I haven't for me, but for you, I've already announced that I will be doing the top 10 TNG best and worst episodes chosen by you, my loyal viewers, or casual viewers, doesn't matter. Either one, you will be picking top 10 best and top 10 worst TNG episodes by leaving a comment on any of my videos. Say this one, for example, could be possibly with your top 10 best TNG episodes, your top 10 worst TNG episodes, 2 separate lists, and I will take everybody's list and mush them all together and come up with a collective top 10 best, top 10 worst, chosen by you, the viewers. I won't even put my list in there, so just be, I'm out of it. Let you do all the work. Well, no, I'll be doing all the contabulating, so I'll be doing some of the work. Anyway, so if you haven't done that already, be sure to, put your thinking cap on and think of what your 10 favorite TNG episodes and 10 least favorite ones. Shove them down in the comment, and I'll mush them all together, come up with a live stream that me and my sister will do at the end of the month, after I finish my coverage of TNG. Yeah, it's getting there. We're getting there. We're getting close to finishing the coverage. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, that sort of thing. Very helpful for the channel. And if you would really like to support me, you could possibly, up to you, support me on Patreon. There's a link in the description below, different rewards, different tiers, as I mentioned, pre-releases. Also got a Patreon-only series where I do revisit reviews that I've already made, that sort of thing. You can check it out to see all that in the link below if you are so inclined. Alright, so let's see what's coming up on the old channel here. Thursday will be my review for Genesis, yes. And then Saturday will be my review for Profit and Loss. Still not a good episode, but nowhere near as bad as that other episode that sounds similar to it. Loss, not Lace, Loss. And then on Monday will be my review of Journey's End. And then on Wednesday, my review of Blood Oath. Another Jadzia episode. So, that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Next Generation and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.